there's been a big flip in the story of the book of Esther since last week. Some of you thought last week was the end of the series, and it is not. I kind of wish it was. You'll find out why. You'll find out why I wish it was the end of the story. But we need to hear the end of the story as it plays out, and here's why. There's a big flip that seems to be coming about in our own world, where it seems like the tides are maybe turning and support for the current administration seems to be waning, and maybe something new is going to emerge. And we need to hear what unfolds in the book of Esther, and we need to put it alongside the words of Jesus. Because sometimes the big flip does not actually turn out to be a force for the kingdom of God unfolding. So you might remember that last week, Queen Esther finally comes to King Ahasuerus and asks to have her people saved from the edict of evil Haman, who had set out for the destruction of the Jews. And the king listens to Queen Esther, and Haman gets executed on the gallows that he had built for Mordecai. So there's that big flip, right? The first shall be last, the last shall be first. But let's read what comes next. We're at Esther chapter 8, starting at verse 3. Then Esther spoke again to the king. She fell at his feet, weeping and pleading with him to avert the evil design of Haman the Agagite and the plot that he had devised against the Jews. The king held out the golden scepter to Esther, and Esther rose and stood before the king. She said, "If it pleases the king, and if I have won his favor, and if the things seem right before the king, and I have his approval, let an order be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote, giving orders to destroy the Jews who are in all the provinces of the king." Because remember, they had issued this edict, and there's this weird thing that's going on in their empire that they cannot undo an edict. So this edict still stands, and Esther is saying to the king, like, we got to do something about this. "How can I bear to see the calamity that is coming on my people? Or how can I bear to see the destruction of my kindred?" Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, "See, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have hung him on the pole because he plotted to kill the Jews. You may write as you please with regard to the Jews in the name of the king and seal it with the king's ring, for an edict written in the name of the king and sealed with the king's ring cannot be revoked." So the king gives Esther carte blanche. Do what you want. Write any letter. Make any edict that you want to counteract the edict that had gone out saying that the Jews needed to be destroyed. What an incredible opportunity. What an incredible opportunity for imagination. Think of the number of options that they had to write about what could have counteracted this edict that the Jews must be destroyed. Surely people with as much courage and strategy as Esther and Mordecai, surely they would be able to come up with something fantastic that would undo this edict. Surely the kingdom of God could come to fruition in their midst through this counter edict. Remember the definition of the kingdom of God, just for a moment. The definition of the kingdom of God, the other one. The kingdom of God is sharing power so that people believe they are loved. There we go. Sharing power so that people believe they are loved. Like, what an opportunity here to help people believe that they are loved. Like, The original edict said, "Thou shalt kill, destroy, and annihilate the Jews." They could have just said, "Thou shalt not kill, destroy, and annihilate the Jews." They could have said, "Thou shalt kill animosity, destroy pettiness, and annihilate dust bunnies." They could have said, "Thou shalt kill them with kindness." They could have said, "Thou shalt attack them, but the only weapon you can use is cooked spaghetti." Imagine the possibilities, the vast number of ways that they could have reversed this edict or counterbalanced what this edict gave permission to do. But sadly, Esther and Mordecai's imagination has been taken over by the power of empire. There has been a big flip, but the big flip is that the out-group has become the in-group. So let's look at the definition of empire, expanded definition of empire once again. The in-group for empire. Empire is a group of people claiming total power and spreading the belief that you have the right to take what you want. And then out-group. Empire is a group of people claiming total power and spreading the belief that they have the right to take what they want from you. The big flip here is that those who had been the out-group are now the in-group, and they have the belief that they have the right to take what they want from their enemies. So let's read about what Esther and Mordecai come up with. This is Esther chapter 8, starting at verse 10. He wrote letters in the name of King Ahasuerus, sealed them with the king's ring, and sent them by mounted couriers riding on fast steeds bred from the royal herd. By these letters, the king allowed the Jews who were in every city to assemble and defend their lives, to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate any armed force of any people or province that might attack them, their children, and their women, and to plunder their goods on a single day throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. And then skipping down to verse 15. Then Mordecai went out from the presence of the king, wearing royal robes of blue and white. See, now he's clothed with empire, with a great golden crown and a mantle of fine linen and purple, while the city of Susa shouted and rejoiced. For the Jews, there was light and gladness, joy and honor. In every province and in every city, wherever the king's command and his edict came, there was gladness and joy among the Jews, a festival and a holiday. Furthermore, many of the peoples of the country professed to be Jews because the fear of the Jews had fallen upon them. So their edict is basically that the Jews can fight back. And people are afraid, so they convert to Judaism. There's a history of this in Christianity, too. The Crusades, lots of people converted because of fear of the Christians. That's not the kind of conversion we're after. Now let's keep reading. This is Esther chapter 9, starting at verse 1. Now, in the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, on the 13th day, when the king's command and edict were about to be executed, on the very day when the enemies of Jews hoped to gain power over them, but that had been changed to a day when the Jews would gain power over their foes. The Jews gathered in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to kill those who sought their ruin. And no one could withstand them because the fear of them had fallen upon all the peoples. All the officials of the provinces, the satraps and the governors and the royal officials were supporting the Jews because the fear of Mordecai had fallen upon them. So now everyone is aligning with this guy named Mordecai not because he's such a great leader, but because they're afraid of what will happen to them if they don't. They don't want to lose their position. They don't want to lose their power. They will do whatever they can to fall in line behind Mordecai. This is verse 4. For Mordecai was powerful in the king's palace, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces because the man Mordecai was growing more and more powerful. So the Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, slaughtering and destroying them, and did as they pleased to those who hated them. Now, Remember, the order had said that they could fight back to anyone who was attacking them. But here it says they did what they pleased to people who hated them. It seems like a bit of a taking it a little bit too far. In the citadel of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 people. They killed I didn't practice this enough, Parshandantha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Poratha, Adalia, Aradatha, Parmashta, Arasai, Aradai, and Vaizatha, the 10 sons of Haman, son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. But they did not touch the plunder. They did not touch the plunder. Well, good for them. But the story isn't done yet, because killing 500 people isn't enough. So let's keep reading at verse 11. That very day, the number of those killed in the citadel of Susa was reported to the king. The king said to Queen Esther, "In the citadel of Susa, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 people and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now, what is your petition? It shall be granted to you. And what is your further request? It shall be fulfilled." Again, let's think about all the possibilities of what Esther could have asked for. But here is what she asked for. "If it pleases the king, let the Jews who are in Susa be allowed tomorrow also to do according to this day's edict, and let the 10 sons of Haman be hung on the pole." So the king commanded this to be done. A decree was issued in Susa, and the 10 sons of Haman were hung. The Jews who were in Susa gathered also on the 14th day of the month of Adar and killed 300 persons in Susa, but they did not touch the plunder. Now the other Jews who were in the king's provinces also gathered to defend their lives and gained relief from their enemies, and killed 75,000 of those who hated them, but they laid no hands on the plunder. This was the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th day they rested and made that a day of feasting and gladness. How do you rest and have a day of feasting and gladness with 75,000 dead bodies laying in the streets? I had a Jewish friend, I told you about this before, a Jewish friend who said that his rabbi used to say that the book of Esther shouldn't be in the Bible because it never mentions God. How about the book of Esther shouldn't be in the Bible because of genocide? How about that? But nonetheless, here it is. And we, the people of God, must continue to reckon with this story. Now, this isn't quite the end of the book of Esther either. We're not going to read the rest of it, but the rest of the book gives distinct instructions for how to celebrate the Jews' salvation from the hands of evil Haman each year. And it is celebrated to this day, the Feast of Purim. They read through the whole book of Esther and make it a big party. And I wonder how these yearly parties where this story is reread has shaped the imagination of the Jewish people throughout the millennia. I wonder what role this rehashing of this story plays in response of the Israelis to the October 7th, 2023 attacks of the Palestinian people. From the Palestinian people. In the initial attacks that day, Palestinians killed 1,200 Israelis and maybe 800 or so soldiers since then. But in the years since then, Israelis have killed 71,000 people in Palestine and completely decimated the Gaza Strip. Lest we get too high and mighty, we too live in a culture with its own foundational and regularly celebrated stories of violence. Our society is built on the myth of manifest destiny, This idea that America was destined to expand all the way to the West Coast against all odds, against all peoples who were already there. And it resulted in the death of literally millions of indigenous people, as much as 90% of their population. Like millions of people died because of this myth, this story that's very powerful of manifest destiny, that America is destined to expand. And that's at home, but then abroad, there's this American exceptionalism, this idea that America is special, and when other countries don't treat us as special, we can do all kinds of bad things to them because it is our right. We have the right to do so. Now, you and I may rightly say that we don't subscribe to this. This isn't what we teach our kids, and we want to fight against it. But the fact is that this is all just in the water. And unless we really, really, really work hard at it, we remain part of this system that upholds these stories of violence against others. And even, yes, this story that maybe we have no other choice, maybe there's no other way to live life, or maybe that this is just the way it is, or maybe that we're powerless against it, whatever, but we are part of it. And we cannot say that this is not our story, because it absolutely is our story. So here's the truth about the big flip. When it's just changing who holds the sword, it turns into the big flip-flop. Because what flips one way can flip back the other way, and that, my friends, is the cycle of violence that perpetuates over and over and over and over throughout all of human history, and even in our own homes. So there's an injury. Haman seeks to destroy the Jews because of this injury, because of this blood feud between him and his family that was sparked again because Mordecai refused to bow down. And then Haman sets out to retaliate, not just against Mordecai, but against all the Jewish people before this wrong. And then there's the resentment that the survivors of this, the people who have come, the people who are the Jews who get this edict against them, they get the power, and then they go and destroy everybody else. And do you think that was the end of the story? No, we've seen how anti-Semitism has gone on and on and on and on, and the cycle of violence goes on and on and on. When we are hurt, we hurt others. It's as true in our own homes as it is on a national, international scale. And that's why, my friends, God sets out not to change who holds the sword, but to change our hearts so that we will no longer wield the sword. Hear these words of Jesus from Matthew chapter 5 at verse 43. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. Love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. This is the way of Jesus. And so when Jesus is about to get arrested in the garden before he is crucified, Peter, of course, hauls out his sword and cuts off the ear of one of the servants. And Jesus rebukes him. He said, I will drink my Father's cup. Peter's instinct was the same as Mordecai and Esther's, and it's the same as Haman's, and it's the same as ours. You hurt me, I'll hurt you back. If I can, I'll hurt you back. I'll hurt you before you hurt me. And if I can't do it before you hurt me, I'll hurt you worse. But Jesus heals the man's ear. Jesus washes Judas's feet Jesus asked God to forgive those who crucified him. Jesus doesn't conquer his enemies by fighting back. He stops the cycle of violence by refusing to use anything other than the power of love. And lest we think that love doesn't make a difference, it was a love that was so massive that even death couldn't keep it down. Because, my friends, this is the kingdom of God sharing power so that people believe they are loved, even your enemies. The only way, after all, to get rid of your enemy is to make them your friend. Because if you kill your enemy, then guess who's going to be there to hate you still? Your enemy's brother, your enemy's cousin, your enemy's next door neighbor. The world will never run out of enemies. The only way to get rid of an enemy is to make them your friend. This is the beautiful and devastating good news of the kingdom of God. We are in danger of a big flip-flop in our country. I mean, thank God that the tides are turning against this administration's racism, corruption, and abuse, but let us be wary of simply exchanging who is in power. Let us be wary of the backlash that comes when a different party comes into power with an axe to grind. It is not good if another administration comes into power and enacts all of their policies without regard for the people, for the needs of those who lost power. I'm going to say that again. It is not good for a new administration to come into power and to enact all of their policies and be against those who lost power, because that is the flip-flop, my friends. It goes one way and then it goes the other. And every time, marginalized people get hurt and people lose their lives. Yes, there must be justice. I'm not saying that we let people get away with stuff. There must be justice. But as the people who seek to follow Christ, our goal is the kingdom of God, that even our enemies will get to share the power of love. And justice too often looks like retribution. That's not what we're after. That is not what the kingdom of God is about. It's complicated. Yes, there needs to be consequences, but in the end, there needs to be sharing of power so that people will know that they are loved, including people that we would say have no soul. Don't you dare say that Donald Trump has no soul. He is a child of God, and we must treat him as such. We certainly need to call out evil actions, but we need to let God change our hearts until we have the capacity to love him. If you attend the No Kings protest next month, do not make signs that say F ICE. Just as we want them to treat our immigrant neighbors as human beings loved by God, we must treat them as human beings loved by God. It means that we do things like follow the example of so many people in Minnesota, and we take to the streets, not with hatred and with guns, but with singing. The only way to get rid of an enemy is to make them your friend, to see that they are a human being loved by God. And when someone hurts you, when someone wrongs you, following Christ means that you learn to interrupt your instinct to hurt them back. Now, this doesn't require silence. This doesn't mean that we are spineless and we let people do whatever they want to us. But it requires that we interrupt the instinct to fight back, that we get into our calm nervous system and be able to say simply, that hurt. You can say what you did was wrong. You can say that. You need to say that. But you can say that without hurting them back. Ooh, you can. It's super hard. Believe me, I know how hard this is. But this is the way of the kingdom of God that we say we believe in, that we say we want to be part of, that we say we want to be built in the world. And if we want it to be built in the world, we must build it in our hearts, in our homes, in our workplaces, with our friend groups. And when people hurt us, we have to interrupt the instinct to hurt them back. The words of Jesus from Matthew 5 again. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. Let's join together in prayer. God, this is a hard word to hear. Help us. Just help us. Help us in our unbelief when we don't believe that it could work, or when we don't believe that it's possible to love our enemies, or when we don't believe that when we don't believe that someone actually has a soul and is your child. Help us. Help us.